push. You had a push.
Yeah,
There you
I have the power now.
go. Thank you. Go for it.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Sushrut Athavale, and today we are going to be talking about designing as a developer. Okay, so today's topic, as I said, was designing as a developer, and I'm going to be using. Oops, that's not the. Today's topic is going to be designing as a developer in GoLang, and just before we start, a little bit about myself. My name is Sushrut Athavale. I'm a software engineer at JFrog. I'm a DevOps developer, and the work I do at JFrog tends to be more broad. I build various integrations. I've worked at VMware and a startup called Pivotal before that. If you want to follow me, or if you're interested in my career history, the LinkedIn is in the meetup page, and then my Twitter is also right here. So the big theme behind what I wanted to talk about today can be boiled down to this one line, that the disconnect between design and development can often be fatal in any project you're doing, whether it's open source, DevOps, front end, back end, etc. The way a lot of companies work is you'll have a design team or a product management team or some product team that decides what the product should be, what the feature should be in it, what it should accomplish for the customer. And then it's up to the developer to architect or develop or build the actual product. But if the vision of the designer and the implementation of the developer is disconnected, if there isn't a common understanding on what the actual goal is, it can lead to failures, and it can be, people can just glance right past it, but it can lead to fatal failures in your product, in your project, in your company, etc. And so I think it's really important as a developer to understand what the designers are coming from, where the product teams are coming from, and understand how just a general sense of design can really help you architect and just code in a day-to-day basis. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the 7 facets of user experience. This is a great introduction into the world of design. This design concepts can be applied more broadly to non-technical aspects, but it can also be applied technically. The information presented here today is based off of this man, Peter Morville, who's written a lot about the topic, and I enjoy from what I've seen of him as well. And we'll be going through the 7 facets of design here, and there'll be some examples in Go. So without further ado, let's jump right into it with the first facet of user experience. And this one is very straightforward. Whatever you're building should be useful. And even though it is straightforward, it can be often confused. Like, for example, I watch a lot of Shark Tank, and there's a lot of products on Shark Tank that a lot of people would say isn't very useful. Something that you think is useful to you may not be useful to the majority. And so when you're developing or designing a product, you have to really think, is it worth this? Is it worth spending the time to build out this feature, this project, if it's not useful? If it's not useful for as many people. One important thing to note about usefulness is that it's really in the eye of the beholder. It is a subjective understanding. That's why I have eye of the beholder picture here. Something that is useful is really a subjective understanding for depending on who's using it, right? I would consider a really fancy desktop PC really useful for me, but it's not useful for my mother, who doesn't like to play games or isn't a very big programmer or a programmer at all. So that's useful. The second facet of user design is usability. And so usability is what most people think of when they're thinking of user experience. When they're thinking of good design, they're thinking of really usable, really clean designs. And this is the most common element that most of us have been exposed to. Um, it should do what your product should do what the customer wants in a very easy fashion. So when you're actually developing code or something, like, and the designer has told you that, oh, we want to do this and we want you to do it this way, really think about it. Like, really think about what the product manager, what the designer is telling you and asking for. Why did they ask for a button in a certain place if you're doing a front end development? Or why did they ask for your Go CLI to have two different commands here? And really think about, well, I think that in Cobra CLI, I can do this in a better way than what you've designed from my technical knowledge. And that's just generally what we're talking about here. So some great examples of usability. I'm actually no longer going to include Venmo in this slide. This is kind of got dated, but Robinhood and Uber, for example, disrupted, and Venmo too, disrupted very established industries like the taxi industry, the investment industry, the peer-to-peer transaction industry that PayPal first disrupted. And they disrupted and they just ate a bunch of market share really quickly. They created new markets like Robinhood for people that didn't do it. And the way they did this was just by having a really usable interface. And that is what's like, and that is why this design in this sense is important. The reason why I said Venmo I may not include in like further presentations is because, well, what's the one thing you want to do on Venmo? You want to do a peer-to-peer transaction. And now it takes a little too many button clicks to send money or receive money on Venmo. And honestly, that does make a difference. And that's the sort of things you should think about when you're a developer. If your designer tells you that we're going to switch this button around, really say that feel free to push back and say, hi, I think this will make this less usable. I think it'll make Venmo less usable. And you have that prerogative as a developer. A lot of developers think, oh, I just have to shut up and do this. No, you know, in the end, we're all invested in the companies we're developing for, or the companies that we're like in charge or managing or founding. And everybody wants to have a successful company because then everybody gets more profit, gets more benefit, gets to see their vision realized. So that's the second aspect of user design. The third aspect of user design is findability. This really has to deal with the organization of information. It really just talking about the specific features of your product. And what it really means is that if your product can do a lot of things, like, wow, we have, 100 different like APIs you can use. We have 1,000 different integrations. We're AWS. We have like everything in the world in our console, but no one can find what they need in a reasonable amount of time, then your product becomes useless. And so that's what findability is all about. There are very specific ways to improve findability. And one of the best ways that I can tell you right now in the short presentation is metaphors and industry standards. Someone solved this problem already. Kubernetes is like a giant product right now, and when you're building something off of Kubernetes or building a Kubernetes layer or building like something with kubectl, build off of what Kubernetes has already done. For example, in my career, I've built a Go command line interface that interfaced with Kubernetes as it was meant to be used by Kubernetes users. And so when it came time to do basic things like creating or deleting things or running things, we copied basically word for word how the Kubernetes CTL, the kube controller here, was set up. And we found that our users could pick up and use our Go command line interface without ever seeing it before. It was amazing. They could find everything they wanted to. They could use everything they wanted to. Kubernetes has some weird intricacies in how they're like they're set up, but as long as we copied that and we're targeting K8s users, then Kubernetes users will able to use it. So that's an easy way to make your things findable, and it's really important. This is making your things really findable is really important. Yes. Okay. That's findability. That is number 3. User facet number 4, credibility. A lot of these, I'm going to take a short sidebar here to talk about subjectivity versus objectivity. A lot of these design facets we're talking about are either subjective or objective, meaning you can measure it or you can't. If you're trying to make something findable, you can usually measure it by putting it in front of a user and timing how long it takes the user to find something, a new user. You can measure usability by measuring the amount of clicks it takes for a user to complete a certain action, or measuring the time once again. Usefulness is one of the subjective ones where it's kind of hard to measure. You have to do it on a qualitative scale. How useful do you think this is from 1 to 10? In that sense, credibility is another subjective design facet. And this one requires you to be on top of. And this one, I think developers can really put a lot of input in. Developers, like you, such as I'm assuming a lot of you are developers here, are going out to meetups, are going around, they're developing every day. They know what they're looking at. They have been trained and they have learned over a lot of experience what sources are credible or not. And the definition of what is credible changes over time, and developers are at the forefront of that line of thinking. So if someone tells you to do something that may lose you credibility, then you should think about that. Or when you're just developing code and it's an open source project, for example, you have to make sure that the comments you're typing, the variables you're using, help to maintain professionalism and credibility in what you're doing. Some examples of credibility, and before I get to examples, it's very, 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 very difficult to recoup lost credibility. It's all a matter of trust, and if people don't trust you, it's hard to get that back. Facebook had to do a rebrand because people started to lose faith in Facebook, lose their trust, and Facebook lost their credibility. Either rebrand may not be not working. That is a controversial topic. I won't talk on that. But but there are some surefire ways to build credibility. We just talked about metaphors and industry standards for findable. So again, try and follow those same things. I have Cobra CLI here as an example, because Cobra CLI is a library or a tool that you use to build Go CLIs, Go command line interfaces, and they have managed to establish them as a credible tool in the space. So if you're building something with Go and you want users to use it, maybe take a look at how Cobra did it and how Cobra presents themselves in their website and in their open source documentation, and try and copy that. And then really think about when you're developing on a day-to-day, what do you see that makes you wary of something? Well, a great example is documentation. In the old days, the documentation used to be like a big PDF you could download or print out, or it would be delivered to you like a book. If I saw a documentation for a product that I had to download today, I would not use that product. I would not trust that product. It is very subjective, but most documentation is usually hosted on a website today that is searchable and it's easily findable, and a printed documentation or a PDF documentation isn't like that. And so that's important. So really pay attention to trends like that. Really take a step back and reflect and say, when you're finishing something, okay, is this going to be credible? Am I going to be doing something fishy here, etc.? Okay, so that's number 4. Sorry, give me a second here. I need to drink some water. Okay. User facet number 5, desirability. This one is a little bit harder for a developer to do. This is mostly when you're building desirability, it's all about the brand, the aesthetics, the identity, the marketing of a product. And if you're just a developer and you're not maybe working on the front end or a front end CLI, and you're doing server-side Go stuff, it's not something that I haven't been able to figure out how I can really apply it to my coding. But you are participating in this design aspect because as a developer, you're at a Go meetup. And so, for example, desirability is all about a brand. And so if you look at the state of software engineers in 2021, there's like a big report that comes out. It's a Hired report. They looked at what was the most trending topics in software engineering. And right now, or this might be a little dated because this is a 2021 report. There was a 2.3 times increase in interview requests for people who would go on their like applications and profiles than the previous years. And we still see that growing for Go. And Go itself is something that has managed to brand and market itself as this really clean, simple tool for building like server-side applications. And so that's all a part of the desirability of Go. And so if you're building a product and you're going to build something from like start to finish, really think about ways that other people can make it desirable, or you can make it desirable self. Okay. This is design facet number 6, accessibility. This design facet, and then when I first learned more and more about accessibility, is what first got me personally interested in design. Accessibility is a very broad category of topics, and at the same time is often overlooked by pretty much everyone. Accessibility doesn't just mean designing for disability. Accessibility means making your product more usable by more communities. Accessibility can mean adding more languages to your product so that more communities can use it. And why is accessibility important? Well, it's really simple. If your product is accessible to more people, then you have more potential users to use the thing you built. You can share your awesome thing with way more people. And so that's why accessibility is important. And then another stat that I found interesting when I was first learning about accessibility is that a lot of people require accessible features. 20% of Americans, for example, suffer from some sort of disability that hampers their day-to-day life. And so that's 1/5 of the US that you could be missing out if you don't do any accessibility design or any sort of accessibility review. One interesting aspect of accessibility is that designing for a community that you would otherwise not worry about can improve all the other design aspects we talked about, and just improve your product as a whole. One of the biggest and most classic examples of accessibility design improving the product of something in the broad sense is subtitling. Subtitles were originally created to allow those of hard of hearing or those who are deaf to enjoy a movie so they can read the subtitles. But it turns out that a lot of people love having subtitles on when they're watching a movie, watching TV, playing a game. It turns out it's really important. It turns out if there's a lot of things going on the screen or a lot of sound happening, sometimes you just want to read the subtitles to do it. And they found that a lot more people than that actually needed the subtitles were using the subtitles, which made it amazing feature. So a lot of people implement subtitles right now for that same idea. Another example of this great of designing for accessibility leading to a great product is this controller on the bottom right. This controller is the Xbox Accessible controller. I don't know if that's the initial name, but they built this controller because they found that traditional controllers didn't usually lend themselves to be usable by people with disabilities, physical disabilities specifically. And so they added a lot of buttons. They made it very modular and configurable. So if you had a disability on your left hand versus your right hand, you can use it with your feet. You can use it with your mouth. There's a little remote you can put in your mouth. And so it has a lot of different modules and options and controls. what ended up happening is that people found that this really highly customizable model for controllers was great for controlling robots and programs for doing like real life to software interfacing. And so this accessible controller they built designed for disability, it does a really good job at being very versatile tool for people developing robots and other things. And that's why, and I thought that was fascinating. That's why accessible design can lead to amazing products. And then an example in Go, Go doesn't have a ternary operator. It doesn't let you do a if-else statement in one line with a ternary operator. And this is a very conscious decision by the people who made Go. They could very easily implement a ternary operator if they wanted to. But one of the three facets of like Go when they were building it, one of the paradigms of Go was that it should be simple and easy to use. And they really thought about a lot of things when building Go, and you can see it all over the language. In the end, they decided very firmly that the ternary operator was not something that they thought was simple and easy to use, and so they removed it from the language, or they never implemented it in the first place. And there's a lot of examples like that. Go struggles with polymorphism in that sense because it wasn't simple and easy to use, but there's a lot of complications behind that statement, so I won't go too much into it. So that's accessibility design. I think it's one of the most important things here. When you're thinking about developing on your own code, I built a lot of command line interfaces in Go. That's my entry to it. But if you're building a server or command line interface, really think about who's using it, and then really think about who could use it if you did something. It's a very hard question to ask yourself. It'd be an important question to ask yourself would be, by implementing my server this way, am I not allowing somebody to use this? You can think of this question in the way of, if I'm implementing my server this way or my Go program this way, am I not allowing certain technologies to access this? Would this be hard for a Linux environment to use? Would this be hard for a Windows environment to use, etc.? Would this be hard for certain browsers to use? And that's where accessibility design comes from. If you're thinking about this like on a day-to-day basis, then when you won't have to spend too much time in the future trying to retrofit things to things, or like, oh, it doesn't work with this product, let's go fix that. And there's a lot of tools out there to help in that sense of accessibility too. Yeah, so I spend a lot of time on accessibility because this is my favorite facet. I think it's one of the most important. And then the last facet. This one is another subjective facet. You can measure accessibility, by the way. I'm just going to jump back. Accessibility is something you can measure. It's a bit harder to measure, but you can get like two groups of people and do like two different designs for your product and see which ones more folks like better, and that'll give you a broad sense of accessibility. But in that sense, this last facet is subjective. This is a lot of marketing teams will spend a lot of time in this. Valuable. Why should users come to you? Why should users use your product over your competitors? Why is your product sufficiently valuable for other users to switch? And when it comes to these first two aspects, you as the developer who's developing this are also probably using your own product, or have used your own product, or know people who use your own product. So there is a possibility that like, man, I really wish we had this feature, but it's just not on our roadmap. And if you're like confident enough about that, and if you really think users would like that, then go ahead, bring that up to your product managers, bring that up to your manager, bring that up to your higher ups, and if you're bring that up to your product architect, and really, like, don't be afraid. Everyone wants the product to be successful in the end, because that is what's making your money. That is what's adding the value to the company. So really, like, don't keep those thoughts to yourself. Really think about that when you're doing a day-to-day coding, because you are the one who's developing the product. So you're the one who knows where this value is coming from. And that this comes to the most important part of valuable is, you know, how much developing a product is going to cost. If someone comes to you to develop something, or if you're trying to develop something, you know how much that development is going to cost. If you can think, okay, my designer, my product manager wants me to build a Go server that does all of these things, but some of the specific things that he's asking for in the specific way he wants it are going to cost a lot of money in terms of development time. I can shrink that development time if we switch it around and maintain this vision. That's what this whole presentation comes down to, is if you can make yourself, if you can decrease the cost of your development time of the product from what you are doing as an engineer, in terms of engineering time, you increase your own value because you're saving the company money. And increasing your own value is a good thing, because then you could ask for, well, you've increased your own value. You're a more valuable engineer. You can go somewhere else, and you could stay at the same company, or you can get paid more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So value can be measured in terms of cost. It's really important to remember when you're thinking about, is your product valuable? Because in the other sense is, if there's someone's asking you to build something that will take 3 weeks to build and only is going to be used once a month, that's not a valuable use of your time. And so that's where valuable really comes in. So those are the 7 facets of user design. And before I move on, should explain the example. Google here. I have the example of Google here because to this day, the Google homepage has basically remained the simple word Google and then the search bar. They know that the most valuable thing about their homepage and the most important thing that exists there is the search bar. They have some bookmarks underneath it. You can add stuff to the background, but they decided that that's the most valuable part about that website, and they haven't changed it. And it's a great design decision. If they added or cluttered or changed it, it would honestly hurt their product. So that's something to think about. Think about valuable. So yeah, so that's the 7 design facets. You can go a lot further in with all of these facets, and just I could talk about them for hours. And then after you first learn them, you get a grip of them, you understand what they mean, and you start thinking about them when you're coding, you start realizing that, hey, making something findable might make it less credible, or might make it less desirable, right? Imagine an airplane cockpit, right? You could argue that an airplane cockpit is horribly unfindable, right? You can't find anything in an airplane cockpit, right? As an unexperienced person myself. But an airplane cockpit to a pilot is incredibly usable, because you can find, if a pilot is trained, they know where all the buttons are, they know what everything does. And so they basically can do any function that they want in one press, one button click, and one touch on the cockpit. And so that they really decided that for an airplane, it's way more useful for something to be usable than for something to be findable, because you need to find it, you need to be able to use it quickly. And so that is an example of design facets contradicting each other. And that's where you really start to get into the meat of what you can do as a developer, because sometimes a designer will tell you that, hey, we want to make this really elegant, sleek, desirable design that in the end obfuscates a lot of important information from the user. And if you're building a product for experts, maybe you'd say, hey, we don't want a sleek, elegant design. We don't need a Robin Hood right now. We need an airplane cockpit for this super user of Go, for the super user of Kubernetes. And as a developer, you're the one developing it. You might know your users. You may have talked to your users like the product managers have. You might know something they don't. So really bring that up, add value, and or suggest a different proposal. Say, hey, maybe we can meet in the middle. And that's where a lot of the more interesting design meatiness comes from. And that's where you can really, And that's where, if a good understanding of design is you have as a developer, that's where you can really meet your management teams in the middle and build great products and build products that users actually want, that are going to be useful, that are going to be valuable, and without failure. Because and that is where we get to even further into design. If you want to know more about these specific facets or design in a whole, here's some good starting resources. We have a blog post and 3 books by Peter Morville, who a lot of this presentation was based off of. He talks more in depth about specific design facets and like the web in general. And then if you care about design on more of a broad scale and more of a, you're looking around the world and you're wondering how things are designed, one of my favorite books is The Design of Everyday Things. And this design book is amazing. They talk about everything from a teapot to a door and how it was designed and how you can apply it to your life and how you can apply it to your engineering projects. And I think most engineers should take a look at The Design of Everyday Things. If you have any questions for me, I would love to hear them. And I will be here for a few minutes longer in the chat as well. But other than that, that concludes my presentation. So thank you all for listening to me today, and I hope you learned something.
Hey, thanks. Thank you so much, Sushrut. We'll definitely get to our next speaker shortly, but I wanted to see, does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask regarding anything Sushrut shared? Going once, going twice. Okay, well, hey, Sushrut, great job. And you can definitely reach Sushrut via email or on Twitter. He's very findable, and really appreciate you sharing some really important information that I know that we can all apply on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much again.
Okay, thank you. I saw what you did there with the findable.
Absolutely. Yes, making yourself findable, that's important, right?
Yes.
All right, awesome. Let me go ahead and see here about getting the host into the hands of Thiha. Actually, let's see here. I'm going to make you the host, Thiha. And do you want to change the hosts?
I gave it to GoSF Meetup.
Oh, you did. That's me. Okay, cool. So I'm going to give it to somebody else now. And
do you hear me well?
We can. Can you share your slides, Thiha, at this point, or no?
Yeah. Nope, not yet.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and make you the host, and you should be able to share them. And feel free to go and introduce yourself. And thanks for sharing with us. We're looking forward to this.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see presentation mode. Cool. Hi, I'm Thiha Min. I lead engineering at lookfirst.io. Our company name is Thiha. Previously, I was the first hire at Postmates, and I stayed until Uber acquired us. And I'm going to talk about my experience implementing video transcoding on the Google Cloud. So the background of the app that we are currently building, it's called a Look First app. And the idea is, as a user, you will take notes of what you like with photos and videos, and save the notes into collections. Those notes can be like your favorite restaurants or your travel spots, or like the products that you want to shop and that you like. And those notes will serve as recommendations for other who have similar interest. And the app is currently in development. So those are some screens. The user will select what they're interested in, and you will see what other people post, and then you can collect into your collections. So the tech stack at the backend is in GoLang on the Google Cloud, and we are building an iOS app, and we have a web front end, and the REST API are served via Kubernetes. And then for the asynchronous tasks like image resizing, we have Cloud Task, and I'm currently using PubSub for this video transcoding flow, and we have Postgres, Redis, cloud storage, and then Cloud Run for the as a walker to PubSub. And then in the future we might use like Elasticsearch or like Bigtable or like Spanner if we need to scale. So here is the flow. So the first iOS app will call the REST API to upload the video, and the server will return signed URL, and the iOS app can upload the video file directly to the Google Cloud Storage using the signed URL. So there's a PubSub event that will send the file upload event to Cloud Run, and the Cloud Run will call to the Transcoder API to transcode the video to various sizes. And then when the transcoder finish, it will trigger another PubSub event, and the Cloud Run will process that event and save that the video transcoding is done. So that's the flow. I'm currently using the Transcoder API because it's there, and I don't need to deal with all the configuration. I saw people recommended to use this FFmpeg library, but currently I'm trying to build this as fast as we can. So I'm just explaining that flow that I just talked about, and here is the resulting file from the Transcoder API. So the OIG is the original file, the original video file, and then the transcoder will create these files. The important ones are this M3U8, which is the Apple streaming thing, and then there's a dash file, which is for the Android and web. So, and when those are streams, so it depends on the quality of the connection. It should switch between like a standard or like HD. So the error that I had was when I was developing, I was writing all the video file into one GCS packet. So after the transcoder finished transcoding, it was writing back to the same packet, and I have an PubSub subscription listening to the same packet. So those like files from the transcoder will trigger another rounds of like calls to the transcoder, and that got into a loop. And it was I was aware that it was the loop was happening, but I thought the calling to the Transcoder API with the already transcoded file will just return errors. But it turned out that I was just actually calling with the same original file whenever I call to the Transcoder API. So that those got into the exponential loop. So on Monday, I implemented that flow on a Friday evening, and then on Monday I came back to continue my implementation, and I found that there was some events going on that I was not expecting, and then I saw like 75% of the calls were erroring out. So and the billing section of the Google Cloud showed that each day it costs about like $2,500. So I disabled the Transcoder API to control the damage, and then I went into a look at the PubSub, and there was like 1.3 million messages on PubSub. So because it was retrying, so I pushed the queue so that the retry of those tasks will stop, and I look on the Google console and found that there's a GCP billing billing support that I can contact. Oh yeah, the total cost was like close to 6,800 or close to like 6,900 for the weekend. Transcoder API costs like 3 cents a minute to transcode. So I got a hold of somebody on the GCP via chat, and I have to plead with the support that the cost will be a heavy burden to us. So the support person to ask me to wait for like 40 hours for all the bills to come in, and he or she will send the request to be reviewed by different team. And then I dug into the Cloud Run logs to see what actually happened, and it's turned out that the errors are not the errors from the transcoder. It was actually the rate limit error, because I'd sent a lot of the code that I was sending a lot of jobs, so the APIs was got rate limited. And then one thing that I found out is that by default, the pub sub will retry an error for 7 days. The Transcoder API, a rate limit, they have a max of like 20 concurrent transcoding job by default. If they ever allow more, the cost would have been much higher. So this is the code of the time when the error happened. This function is what I connected when an object is uploaded to cloud storage, and the pub sub will send the event, and the event will call to this object change method. And this is just I'm marshalling the message, and I pass the UID, and then call to the Transcoder API, and that's resulted into a loop because it's right into the same bucket. I found an article online that was maybe a couple of years ago. Somebody was playing around with the Cloud Run, and he or she was implementing a crawler, and he didn't realize there's web links can reference into a loop, and the person got like $72,000 bill from the GCP just by one day. And then he said like when he contacted the GCP, they waived the cost as a one-time courtesy thing. So yeah, for me on Friday, the GCP responded that they will reduce the cost by 85% as a one-time courtesy. So the actual cost was a little over $1,000. So the reduction of cost went into as a GCP credit to our account. So the lessons learned: the serverless are very powerful to scale up, but we need to be careful when we are implementing. The Cloud Run and pub sub can still scale massively, but the cost will be on the account owner to deal with. Maybe like if you get like DDoS or something. The issue might not have happened if it's if it's the code is an actual production, because we are likely to have some alert which were caught early. We can set up the billing alerts on the Google Cloud. That will send an email, or like we can have a pub sub event set up. But the issue with the pub sub on the billing alerts is that after the budget goes over, it keeps sending the alert for like every hour. So I cannot just turn off the project every time this alert trigger. I also try to connect with the Slack, and it's too noisy. I wish like the pub sub events is only one time. For the pub sub retrying for 7 days, we can set up a dead letter queue or a dead letter topic and then we can limit the number of retries in PubSub. Because at the time I was actively developing it, I didn't get around to like implementing those yet. So now the buckets are split into two, and the only subscribes the object finalize event from the bucket where the original files are uploaded to. And then I also lower the request quota of the Transcoder API on our stage project, so that whatever, if the error happened again, it wouldn't cost too much. And then added the retry count on lower the retry count on the PubSub. Still need to set up the alert, maybe with the Stackdriver or like Prometheus alerts. Haven't done it yet because we haven't actually launched yet. So this is like a side thing. One thing that I still need to learn is like how to set up our local development environment when we use a lot of these serverless environment like Cloud Tasks, Cloud Run, and like PubSub. We cannot just create like Docker container for the local. I saw the GCP has these emulators for the client, but haven't looked into it yet. Yeah, we plan to have our MVP of the app around to beta test around like May or June. In the future, if we decide to include live streaming, somebody recommended me to look into this Agora.io. That's my talk. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Yep.
I was wondering, what was the decision-making process in selecting Google Cloud Platform? How did you guys arrive at that particular like cloud as opposed to like all the other ones?
Yeah, when we were at Postmates, when I was at Postmates, we are initially on AWS, and we switched over to GCP in the last like couple of years when I was there. It was the cost, I think. For me, it was like, I find it the docs are slightly easier to read than AWS. So, and then I really like to work with BigQuery. We were using Redshift on AWS, and like some queries take like, I don't know, a few minutes, and the BigQuery will like chunk out some queries like gigs of like even like terabyte of data in like 30 seconds. So it's like, yeah, it's mostly like familiarity and then
from prior experience.
Yeah.
So I have like a follow-up question. I was wondering, given that you're basically using a lot of like features from Google Cloud, do you think that you're basically potentially pigeonholing yourself into basically kind of like being stuck at Google Cloud instead of being able to like easily move away from them if you need to by using kind of like, you know, are you abstracting yourself away from like Google Cloud in terms of like your implementation?
Currently not, because we are a startup and we are just starting. That's the least of our concern right now.
Gotcha.
If we don't get a product market fit, we won't exist.
Sounds reasonable.
And then like at Postmates, we switch over, so it is still possible to do.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good questions. Good. It's always good to learn from where other people, had some issues. So I'm sure that hopefully this will save somebody somewhere along the line. Thea, is there any other questions regarding the situation that Thea shared with us?
Or any other feedback on like what I've been doing?
Yeah, I have one question.
Yep.
Have you considered any other solutions other than Google's PubSub?
The reason that I was using PubSub was when
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to know if there are any good alternatives that are not Google specific.
Oh, well, they are good alternative. I'm trying to build this as fast as I can. So when I read the docs, most of their components go with the pub sub, right? The Google Cloud Storage is that, oh, I can just subscribe to an event for this event, not event, the file upload event. And then when the transcoder finish, I can get a pub sub event. So like a lot of things works with pub sub on the Google Land. So that's why I'm using pub sub. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does it answer your question? When I was doing the image processing, I'm like still like learning Google Cloud. I use Cloud Task because I used to use the RabbitMQ, and that's in the Django Python Django wall. And then Cloud Task is the hosted one. So yeah, it's similar to that. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions?
Hey, hi. So I was just wondering, like, why you're not using this FFmpeg pack? Like, instead of using this, you are directly using this Transcoder API.
Why am I not using the FFmpeg?
Yeah. Like, directly you can use it. And then...
I haven't used it, so I don't know how easy or difficult. I feel like I have to understand all the configuration that I need to do that. Do you have an experience?
Look, I'm in this edtech company where we do processing of videos and all. So yeah, like I'm kind of like very new, but like I was still wondering. So I just asked.
Yeah, I saw like people recommended that to use FFmpeg, but I think I have to set up the machine with the GPU, and then like have to understand all the configuration. At that time, like, okay, I don't want to know that yet if I don't need to. And then if the cost is an issue, we can switch to that. That was the thinking.
Oh.
Because this is just a new app. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else? Okay. Awesome. Thea, thank you so much. Definitely a pleasure hearing from you tonight.